So before we begin, I'd just like to inform you all that once this session concludes, we'll be breaking to lunch. Lunch will be in the usual Richmond Ballroom that we've been having all of our meals at. For those also attending the Incident Management Preparedness and Response Workshop powered by the Ontario Centre of Excellence, you guys can return to Grand York B at 12:30 p.m. And those attending the Cyber 42 tabletop powered by SANS can proceed to the check-in desk at 11:35. And if anyone asks, lunch will be served in the room for Cyber 42. So now it is my great pleasure to actually introduce the folks who are sitting in front of us today. This is going to be a great session talking about leveraging social engineering simulations to manage human risk. I myself, before I became a CISO, I was a threat intelligence specialist by base, so this is something I find very interesting, and I think it's a very important thing for organizations to really get their heads around, because social engineering is the enablement for one of the major vectors of compromise, which is phishing, and obviously text smishing as well, and all sorts of other things that happen through human manipulation. So I'm happy to introduce our panel, which is powered by CDW. So our speakers, just in front of me here, Mr. Darren Chin, Ms. Kaitee Stuart, and Mr. Ben Boi-Doku.
That's it.
Awesome. No, it's the first time. Got
Yeah,
it.
good man.
So with that, I present the floor to them. My friends, go ahead.
Thanks, George. So today we're going to be talking about leveraging social engineering to manage human risk. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about us, the challenges that we face when it comes to social engineering or pen testing people, the techniques that are used. We're going to get into real world scenarios that we've used to compromise clients during our simulations, the solutions overall, what are our recommendations that we've provided clients to assist them in strengthening their security programs. We'll wrap it up and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So a little bit about us. I'm Ben Boi-Doku. I lead the risk advisory services practice for Canada. We've been a team for about 15 years. I believe we're going on 16 years now by way of 2 acquisitions. We are very proud to be CDW's risk advisory services arm. Our team is primarily responsible for penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, as well as threat risk assessments, privacy impact assessments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anything to do with risk, our team covers from a paper security standpoint, as well as an actual tactical security standpoint as well, or offensive security standpoint. Darren Chin has been along for the ride for about 14 years now as well. Between Darren and I, we started up the actual pen testing practice within risk advisory services about 10 years ago. And we are very fortunate to have Kaitee join our team as well. Not only is she an expert in pen testing, whether it's web app, network, et cetera, she's exceptional when it comes to social engineering pen testing. So the overall challenge, very quick 101, social engineering is really the manipulation of people to either have them divulge sensitive information or to have them perform actions. Now, why this is an issue, as George mentioned in the intro, is because people often look at humans as the weakest link in the security chain. That being said, if you're able to compromise people, you're able to get them to do things. And that's where the real challenge is, and that's where the risk is. We could have all the firewalls, IDSs, IPSs, all of the SASEs in place, but if you compromise an individual, your defenses are pretty much gone, and we've done it. We've taken over internal networks, we've taken over financial systems. We've seen the results of not preparing for a social engineering attack. When we look at where these risks can lead, financial loss, identity theft, or damage to your reputation or trust of your organization as well. One of my favorite stories is, and I burnt this last year, so I'm not afraid to burn this scenario as well this year. We conducted a social engineering campaign for a national company, and we were able to compromise their data center by only wearing a red t-shirt that said DoorDash on it. We carried a box of food or a bag of food like we're actually making a delivery, but we were able to compromise their internal network. They let us in, we put our bad USB key in, we took over their network. So looking at the overall challenge, when we look at Proofpoint's report that they released on the state of phishing, 54% of phishing attacks led to a breach of client data. 48% of the attacks resulted in an account compromise, and 48% resulted in a ransomware infection. So with all those three scenarios, that's pretty much a 1 in 2 chance that your individuals are getting compromised, and the result is your data is being compromised, or you're being locked out of your data, or you're getting people to send information that they shouldn't be sending. So looking at the overall challenge, again, employee awareness. Employee awareness is important. We run our employee awareness campaigns. They're probably part of all of our compliance programs. The issue is only 53% of the employees that were surveyed can actually accurately describe a phishing engagement or a phishing attack. 36% know what ransomware is. Only 24% understand phishing. And I'll be honest, I didn't understand phishing until I prepared for this. I called it something else way back when, but we'll get into that as well. And 42% of the users admitted to taking risky actions. Again, guilty. Not on corporate devices, but I've browsed bad places and clicked bad links. I'm as guilty as the 42% that admitted that as well. And working from home introduced a new challenge because now our threat surface has expanded. Personal devices are being used for work. Using work devices for personal purposes has increased as well. 42% of the people that were surveyed checked their personal email on their corporate device, as well as 56% of the people surveyed allowed a friend or family member to use their work device. So there's a lack of dedicated staff or work hours. 18% of the individuals surveyed in the SANS survey responded that they don't have the time to dedicate full-time hours to providing security awareness overall for the organization. And it's difficult to produce tailored training as well and testing programs. Training is not scaled as employee awareness improves. This is a big issue. If you're running the same security awareness campaign year after year after year, as your employees are becoming more astute, they're not challenged by it. So they look at it as a campaign that, oh, it's just our yearly campaign. Or even with our own personal experience, when we ran internal campaigns, we knew what to look for with the phishing exercises. If you opened up the MX header in your email, you'll know where it came from. So we knew what to report as phishing right away. It became very easy. Didn't help much after the third time of the same question or the same scenarios. Focusing only on a few areas of risk. Again, you could only do so much in Security Awareness Week. We only focus on so many threats to improve the human posture or employee posture. Employees are not tested on knowledge. Only 41% of organizations conduct email phishing simulations. Now, if you think back at the statistic where 1 in 2 pretty much would fail a phishing attack, only less than half only conduct phishing simulations, and that's a problem there in and of itself, whether it's the automated ones that send out monthly, or you bring in an organization with specialists to conduct a more targeted attack. And it does not provide an accurate picture of employee awareness overall. Tests may not reflect real-world threats. Again, if I'm able to open an MX record and know that this is a phishing attack being sent out from the same system, I don't want to call up the company, but if I'm able to do that, I'm not going to see what a real-world attack would be. And when we do simulations, we're a little bit more crafty when we do those simulations. But talking about how we attack and what we do, I'm going to pass the mic over to Kaitee. As I said, she's going to get into the details of some of the simulations we ran and how some of the techniques we used.
Thank you, Ben. So I'm going to quickly walk through some of the techniques that are used for social engineering, as well as give examples of some of the scenarios we've performed for clients and how those added value and allowed them to address the human risk. So first, email-based phishing. This is one we're pretty much all familiar with. These emails are crafted to entice someone to open it, click a link, perform an action, maybe even download a program or open a document that will open up a backdoor to the person's system. This technique is commonly used by threat actors to capture credentials. And employees are likely to be trained to catch phishing attacks. These are ones that employees are often, only ones that employees are often actually given training on where they'll receive the email, and they'll have to identify whether or not it is legitimate. Like Ben said, though, there are indicators in these phishing emails that are easy for employees that have kept receiving the same ones to spot and just decide, oh, it's phishing based on that, without really understanding and walking through why it's actually a phishing email. So simulations are important to run, and they may be done in-house or by a third party. So some of the benefits of this is to identify how employees will react. In particular, certain simulations, such as the ones I'm going to talk about after, will show you how employees will react to targeted, crafted attacks that are meant to entice a specific person in your organization to perform an action. Additionally, they can identify how public company information can be used to build convincing pretexts. So I'm going to talk about one example of a custom campaign that we created to target a group of high-profile individuals at our organization. So we were asked to create a campaign that would spearfish company executives and capture their credentials in successful attempts. So we started with open source intelligence gathering. This was used to identify interests, community involvement, business relationships for target employees. We were able to identify both external and internal collaborators that would appeal to each target by examining publicly available sources, including news articles, social media, and even the company's own website. So we are also, from looking at this, able to identify that this particular client was using Microsoft Office, as many of us do. So a common daily email that people see is that, who work with the Office 365 products, is one that says like, you know, so-and-so has shared a file with you. It's innocent. You open them all the time. So we created an email for each target, leveraging the interests and business collaborations that we found for them by using OSINT. And then we leveraged the trust and familiarity that the employees would have with the software. They see this every day. This is from somebody they know, allegedly. Why wouldn't they open it? So when they click open, they would be redirected to a website that we had set up to look like their Microsoft login page. This client had a customized Microsoft login page. We put the images from there. We made it look as legitimate as possible. We used a domain that looked like one the company would use. It was just a little bit off. So when they entered their credentials, we would capture them in our software. And then the real world attack, an attacker would now have at least the password to access these accounts. So the value of this identified how publicly available information could be used to create these targeted emails that would target high-profile members of your organization. Oops. And additionally, the value was in training employees on how to spot these. So they should question when they receive something, even though it looks like something they see every day. Were they expecting this email? Did somebody actually send it? Does it actually make sense? They should look at the domain that they're entering credentials in before they do it. And they should look at the email address. The only two indications that this was a phishing attack were the domain to enter the credentials and the email address we sent these emails from. If nobody bothered to look at these, they would easily be duped. So this allowed the client to go back and add this kind of training to the security awareness program and help them to manage their human risk in this area. So the next technique I'm going to talk about is phone-based phishing, or phishing. So this is phishing over the phone. And the goal of a threat actor in these is to get an employee to provide information or perform an action. This could include having an employee provide details about on-site physical security controls, enter their credentials on a website. You know, in the case of a threat actor calling in and pretending to be an employee at your organization and calling your IT department, they might get you to reset an employee's password and provide them with a new set of credentials, giving them access to that account. They might even ask you to run a malicious program that would give them access to your internal network. A sense of urgency or fear is often used to force the target to quickly performing these actions without thinking it through. An example that perhaps we're all familiar with in our daily lives is receiving calls from spam callers letting us know that we're going to be deported or that the CRA wants us to pay some fees. Additionally, spoof phone numbers are often used in these attacks. These numbers will be used to cover tracks or to make the call look more legitimate. An employee who sees the phone number of their corporate office and answers the phone is more likely to assume that the person on the other end works there. Where if they receive a call from a random number, they might be like, oh, this is kind of weird. Why are you calling from this number that isn't even the same area code as ours? So threat actors looking to gain access to an organization will use these tailored attacks that might impersonate employees or other business contexts and appear legitimate. So a benefit of a simulation is that it will look to emulate these and provide valuable insight into how employees will react. Often employees won't be tested on this in your in-house training. You might not have the time, you might not have the resources to do this type of testing. And they will address the gaps in employee awareness and also let employees be more aware of what phishing is. Perhaps they're only familiar with those calls they received with their home number. Those are easy to spot, they seem fake. You know, a couple people might be falling for them, but those attackers are trying to cast a wide net and get, lure only whatever individuals might be duped, whereas in a real world attack, a threat actor is going to make something targeted that will be targeted towards your specific employees that they will be more likely to interact with. So I'll give some examples of some of the real world phishing attacks that we've done for clients. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a multi-factor authentication bypass. This one is an advanced engagement where we're tasked with gaining access to internal resources through whatever means possible, basically emulating a real world threat actor. Using targeted phishing campaigns, we obtained several sets of user credentials. However, multi-factor authentication had been put in place on the services that we wanted to access. So we did some more OSINT and we got the phone numbers of the users whose passwords we had compromised. And we decided to set up an attempt to get the MFA through phishing. We also looked for phone numbers of internal employees that could be used and identities that could be impersonated in this attack. And we set up a domain that would spoof the login portal of the company. It would simply ask for the MFA token though, not their password, just their MFA token. So we had the employee in the IT department who we could impersonate. And we started calling the people who we had the passwords for. We simply identified ourselves as this IT employee and explained that we were testing a new application and we just wanted to make sure every employee in the company would be able to access it, so we were just running some tests. No big deal. We asked the employee to navigate to a web portal. We gave them the domain and let us know if the application showed up. We let them know as well, you're going to be prompted for your MFA just to access this because it is restricted to only employees in our organization. When we called and asked the employees to complete this task, they did. On the back end, we initiated an authentication request to the services that we wanted and quickly put the MFA token in, giving us access to their internal network. Another good example is where we got an employee to execute malware. So this specific case, we were targeting an organization that had a high security awareness posture. They were training their employees on phishing. And we wanted to test if they had the awareness of a combined social engineering attack and whether or not they would fall for it. For this, we developed a pretext where the employee would be informed by email by their IT team that we felt that there was a malicious file on their device and we needed them to run a scanner so that we could see if it was actually there. So a member of the IT team was again impersonated, and we sent an email from an address that looked like theirs. We set up a web portal that mimicked one that we had identified during OSINT that the company was using for remote support. On the mimic portal, we put instructions for how to run the scanner, and then uploaded the scanner and put the code in so that it would automatically download to the user's device when they went to that web page. They would still need to actually run it though. After sending the emails, we quickly called the targets and asked if they'd seen our emails and run the scan. These employees were trained. They all said, no, I didn't run that. I looked at it, it looked weird, and I said it reported as phishing. And we're like, okay, I get it, and it does look a little bit strange. It's not our normal way of doing things, but you have to understand that this is a very immediate threat, and we need you to run this scan. And so by talking to them and reassuring them that we were who we said we were able to have the employees download the scanner and run it, which gave us access to their internal network. Using a combined attack like this provided insight into how employees would react to such a request. In both of these attacks, you're able to impersonate a member of the actual organization, and if an employee had this gave us an advantage. So if an employee looked up at our identities, like say just open it, look and was like, is this a real person? They would see there was a real person working in their IT department with the name that we specified. So it just kind of adds that little bit of a legitimacy to an employee at the first glance. However, further training and practices could help mitigate these types of attacks, including when someone is impersonated. For instance, you should train employees that when they receive requests like this, they should ask to call back on a number that they know internally. Not a number somebody gives them over the phone, but a number that is already posted internally. Just a quick hey, okay, I understand the severity of this, but I'm just going to quickly call you back. Having this set up as a procedure and training in your organization so that both the IT team is aware of it and all your employees are aware of it is just going to help, because the attacker doesn't have your actual phone. They're not going to get the call back. Only the spoof number looks like yours. Additionally, you should train employees to question these type of requests. Have some sort of internal training as to what is the IT team going to ask you to do over the phone? What do we do in the case of having, for instance, having a test application that we want to do? What do we have in case there's your computer might be potentially affected? Another thing you can do is have employees ask identifying questions of people that call saying they're from your organization. We were successfully thwarted on multiple occasions where, despite having researched the person we were impersonating, an employee was able to ask us a question that only that employee would know the answer to, or someone close to them, basically shutting us down. You can try to talk your way out of it, but it becomes a lot hard once they have that seed of doubt in their mind. And again, just teach them to check the domain names of applications and the email addresses that things are coming from. Will be a big step. So the last technique I'm going to talk about is physical social engineering. So these allow a threat actor to gain physical access to otherwise restricted environments, whether it's a secure room in a facility that might otherwise be open to the public, or a secure facility that's barricaded by gates and doors and tons of security features. So some common attacks to gain access to this type of areas include tailgating employees through gates or doors, in addition to convincing employees that you have a legitimate reason to be there and they should let you in. These may be used in combination with attacks against physical barriers, such as lockpicking or badge cloning. Once inside, a threat actor might leverage this access to plant a rogue device on the network, access documents or devices that are lying around, or leave USBs with malicious programs lying around for employees to find and plug in. Employees may be less aware about these types of attacks, and more importantly, they might have a lot more difficulty saying no to someone in person. It's easy to say no to an email. It's a bit easier to say no on the phone. If you have somebody walking through a door behind you, are you really going to turn around and say, "Who are you? Why are you following me?" No, you're probably going to hold the door open and let them walk in. So you need to train employees to become more comfortable questioning these type of things, even though it goes against our kind of idea of common courtesy. So performing simulation of physical social engineering attacks is going to provide insight into employee reactions to the attack vectors, as well as highlight areas of improvement in training, as well as your own physical security controls. So I'll give you a couple examples of some of the attacks that we've done in the real world. So I'll start with one, tailgating. So our client had a lot of physical security controls, including an access-controlled perimeter gate to their facility, as well as facility doors with access controls on them. They wanted to see if you're able to bypass these without interfering with them at all. No lockpicking, no badge cloning, nothing. You're only going to attack the human element. So we observed the facility, and we noted that it would be possible to follow a car through the gates once it was opened by an employee with an access badge. This was because the gate stayed open for over a minute after somebody badged in. You don't want your employee's car to get crushed by the gate when they're walking past, but you also don't want to leave it open so that someone can just go in right after them, right? So we waited for the employee to arrive, and we opened their gates to the access card, and we followed them through in our car. Once we were inside, we waited for another employee to open a door in the main building. We're just loitering around outside, talking, acting, normal. We grabbed the door as the employee went in and held it. And then we walked in after them. Neither the employee in the car or the employee who we walked in after turned around and asked, "Who are you? What are you doing? Why are you here?" We didn't have badges, we didn't look official, we just looked like normal people in business attire. And we just walked into their facility. So the outcome of this test provided our client with insight into employee awareness training, including and especially that employees should be aware of people that are following through doors or gates, and also be comfortable and trained to confront these individuals. Just a simple, "Hey, do I know you? Who are you? Why are you following me? Do you have your card today? Let's sign into security." Just something simple where you're challenging that. It can be difficult, we want to be polite, but you really training employees that they need to question people they don't know, that don't have badge cards or anything to get into the building to prevent these type of things. So the next and final attack that I'll talk about was the USB handoff. So in this case, we wanted to gain access to the company's internal network, and we wanted to use social engineering techniques to do this. So our goal, we decided, was to get an employee to accept a USB that we'd put a malicious program on. This program, when run, will give us access remotely to their system. Again, using open source intelligence gathering, we identified an open job posting at the facility where the department manager worked. and we decided we would apply in person to this job and provide our resume on a USB. We arrived at the facility with the USB that contained the malicious file. We titled it, so-and-so's resume, make it look like it was our resume. And we spoke with an employee and said, hey, I'm here to apply for this job. Can I talk to your manager? And we gave the manager's name, and we're taken over to meet with them. During the conversation with the manager, we offered the USB to the manager and said, hey, like my resume is on here, I didn't have a chance to print it. Is this okay to give it to you like this? And they said, sure, I hope you don't mind, but I won't be able to give you this USB back. And we're like, no, that's okay, it's fine. You can keep it. So we spoke for a little bit and eventually left the facility. After we left, we noticed that the USB had been plugged in. We'd put some code on it that would allow us to know when it was plugged in, as well as to see when the file was open and we got our call back. The plugin was kind of to identify so we could report back to our client. If the employee hadn't run the file, we'd be able to tell if they'd actually plugged it in, right? Because it is possible to program USBs that just on plugin will give remote access. So it was important that we were testing to see whether or not both the employee plugged in the USB as well as opened the document itself. So performing this simulation provided value to our client because it let them know both through how publicly available information could be used in physical social engineering attacks against the organization, as well as identify that there was further training needed for their employees around physical social engineering attack vectors, including accepting random USBs or even just plugging in USBs that are lying around the parking lot or someone's left in the washroom and things like that. So now I've talked about a few of the simulations that we've done to kind of educate clients on where their gaps are. I'm going to hand it over to Darren to talk about some solutions to these issues.
Thanks, Katie. So before I go into my part of the talk, thanks, Katie, for kind of unveiling the curtain and opening up and showing what we on a regular, well, not myself, but Katie does on a regular basis. You can tell from the theme that these attacks are really nothing out of the ordinary in terms of what a normal coworker or employee would be required to do on a daily routine day. Phishing emails, we all get phishing emails. Tailgating, who hasn't allowed someone in to tailgate? Pretty sure everyone has in their company. So it's nothing really out of the ordinary. It's just something that your employees need to be trained and made aware of. So Ben's kind of set the stage about the challenge with regards to training and security awareness. So I'm going to go on and then let you know what we can do to mitigate against this human risk. So the first thing, as we've touched on already quite a bit during the presentation, is training and testing. Training, so continue to educate your employees about the current social engineering attack vectors. Katie went over a number of them in her part of the presentation. We all know about phishing, everyone should be aware. Less so know about ransomware attacks. Phishing, smishing, we've talked about as well, is becoming more prevalent. USB attacks have been around for a long time, and physical on-premise are not as prevalent, but certainly something that we need to be aware of. We're certainly suggesting that you reinforce your testing with your training with some kind of testing. And testing should be performed using simulations, as we've noted here today in the presentation, and using multiple techniques. Attackers use a variety of methods, so you should really be attempting to train all your employees to be able to recognize these. We're suggesting engaging outside parties. The percentage